If I asked you to describe your financial situation, could you accurately tell me where you are, what you have? Would you even be willing to? No matter what your situation is, I promise you, I've heard worse. I'm Sara McCullough, certified financial planner and certified divorce financial analyst, and I'm sharing some of the stories I've experienced over my career, taking those lessons and turning them into actionable steps for you to use. This is I've Heard Worse. Today, I'm going to talk about why you quite possibly hate the term financial planning or financial planner. I'm going to talk about what I think financial planning should be, what financial planning sounds like in my office, and what I think you deserve from a financial plan. If you've ever thought, I wish there was some way to know the answer to the question, how to handle money. If you've ever thought, does everyone do this better than me? If only there were like a financial planner process thing that could answer all my questions. What if you were right and the whole process is wrong? What if the situation's wrong? What if we've been calling something a financial plan that isn't a financial plan, and that's why it didn't answer your questions and it didn't bring you any guidance, strategy, steps that you could execute on? Nothing. It gave you nothing. So if it seems like financial planning is either a luxury service for the ultra wealthy or remedial budgeting advice for the very low income, or as rare as unicorns, why is that? Because most of what's labeled a financial plan in Canada is a sales pitch for managing your investments. We have really tied the term financial plan to investment management. And most of the time when you hear that term used, what the person means is investment plan. They might mean retirement projection, but they probably mean investment plan. And so if you're not ultra wealthy today, and if you're not in a financial crisis, so you don't need remedial budgeting advice, then how do you get this rare as a unicorn thing? Because you want to have a different relationship with your money, because you feel like there's opportunity there, but you don't really know how to take it. And you're pretty sure there's risks there, but you don't really know what that means for you. What if you could see where your opportunities are and where your risky spots are and make confident decisions day to day? That would be exciting. And there is a way to do this. I'm going to give you a typical thought flow that people have before they contact me. And I know this is true because they tell me that this is what happened in our introduction call. So let me know when it feels familiar. Maybe you have money building up in your bank account, usually 4 to 5 to 6 figures. And you're busy and you mean to get to it because you don't really want money just sitting in a bank account not doing anything. But days happen really fast. And you don't want to talk to the bank about it, even though they've maybe called you or they've said something to you when you were in at a branch. They said, we have a specialist, and you thought, I'm aware, I don't want to talk to your specialist. And then one more day, and nothing bad will happen if you wait one more day, but nothing good is happening either because the money's just sitting there. What you don't want, though, is one-sided advice. You don't want to be sitting there thinking, is this good for you or good for me? And you actually don't want to be sold a product. You want options. You want advice. You want to know what happens if I do this? What happens if I do this? What happens if I do this? You don't want to get sold something maybe from a narrow product list that you're not even aware of. And then you start thinking, well, who can help me with this? There must be financial planners somewhere that do this. And then you think, right before you book that meeting, but what if I sound like an idiot? Like, what if I say all of this and I sound like an idiot? You don't sound like an idiot. You sound like a regular person. Most of my introduction calls sound mostly like that. You can just sub out, I have too much money in my bank account, or I'm worried about this. You can just switch in whatever current problem you're having. And it usually ends with, what if I'm an idiot? This does feel like an impossible situation, possibly because you've tried getting financial planning before, you've tried getting your questions answered before, and it hasn't worked. There's a couple of things just in the wealth management landscape and in the financial landscape in Canada that do make this harder. One of the things a lot of my clients are looking for is an objective opinion. I want an objective opinion. I want options. I don't want products. I want to know what all of my options are, and then I want to choose the one that's best for me. And you deserve that. That, I think, is a true statement, and it can be hard to find. You don't want a presentation that leaves out information, because as the client, I don't know what's missing. I want all of the information. And that's why we don't like this idea of being stuck in a sales process, because we think, I don't know what you're not telling me, and I don't know how to know what you're not telling me. And that's also true. I believe as a client, you need to know what all of your options are. You need to know the pros and cons, and you need to decide, because ultimately you are the one that lives with your decision and you live with the outcome. Often my clients say to me, I don't know how to ask the right questions. In my opinion, that is a false statement. You do know. And if you need some prompting, we're going to get to that. And this is something you can do. You can learn to ask the right questions to get the information that you need to make decisions that are in your best interest. So lots of us get stuck in this. Very capable people get tangled up in this loop all the time of not knowing where to go with these financial planning questions. Think back to what I told you that typical conversation flow sounds like. At what point did you laugh in there? You laughed because you recognized yourself. You laughed because you think, I thought I was the only one who thought that. You're not the only one. In this area, you're never the only one. So you can have a really amazing financial planning experience. You just need to start with the right people, start with the right process, and ask questions. So if you've tried this before and it hasn't worked, let's expand a little bit on why it hasn't worked. I've mentioned the financial landscape in Canada. Banks and wealth management firms make their money based on how much of your money they're investing for you. They're not making money on talking you through how to buy your next car, or talking you through how much exactly you can spend on that vacation, or how to best help your family, how to use your investments that you've saved to best help your family, because they don't get compensated on that. And in fact, if they tell you how to best help your family, they're likely to decrease their compensation because you're going to move those investments and give them to your family. So we haven't set up a system where people feel that they can earn a living or make money on giving advice. So the firms that are compensated on managing your money are focused on managing your money. And that makes sense when I say it like that. But we've stapled together in Canada the investment management fee and a financial planning fee. And there's no onus on a firm to do financial planning. You can't force an advisor to do a plan for you. We do have regulations that can force them to manage your investments responsibly, but we don't have a system that really forces an advisor to financially plan for you. So it's not a skill that all of them have. Do I think that it's possible to do this and be profitable? I do. Do I think there are other countries that have done this successfully? There are. Other countries have separated the investment management and the financial planning fees. And you as the client get to choose whom you pay for what. You get to choose what services you are hiring somebody for. And I think we'll get there. We're not there, but I think we'll get there. And I think we'll get there partly because maybe there will be a few brave firms that shift their pricing and their focus. There may be a few advisors who start to shift, but mainly I think it's going to be clients driving this. Clients are going to say, I don't want this anymore. I am going to find alternatives because I don't like what you're offering me, because it's not answering the bigger questions that I have. And I'm dragging around this possible 15 hours of worry a week about my money. I want you to think for a minute about what would change for you. What if you just got options and you believed them? What if you just got to choose? You got options and you got to choose without pressure, without hidden things. If you felt like you had all of the information that you needed to make a confident decision. So why is this idea that a financial plan is really just an investment plan? Why is that so sticky? Partly because of the landscape that we've built in Canada. And we use that term for a lot of things that are not financial planning. And so if you are frustrated, if you hate the term financial planning, because I hear that a lot, I also hear a lot, I would never work with a financial planner because I don't think there's anything valuable that's going to come out of it. I've also heard that too from clients who have gone on to hire me to do their planning. I get that. I get the frustration. I get the, oh, please no feeling in that. So let's talk about, again, why is this happening? I've said, generally speaking, in Canada, we call a lot of things a financial plan that are not a financial plan. Planning as a process, it is rare. Not as rare as unicorns, but it's rare. There's about 100 advisors in Canada that work the way I work. So admittedly, we can be hard to find. But why else, specifically for you, why else might you be feeling stuck in this idea of, I just don't see it. I have questions, I have money stress, I have things that I want to do, and I don't know how to do them. Why might you be stuck? Possibly because you've been duped into asking your actual planning questions to a person who said they were a financial planner and they were going to do your plan. And that got you nowhere. That got you like a bunch of words back that didn't answer any of your questions at all. And so you came away thinking, well, I tried and they didn't answer me. So there must be something wrong with me. Maybe everybody else does know how to do this. No, the person you asked just didn't know how to answer it. It's not a skill set they had. The other thing that happens when we think about other professionals, you can deduct accounting fees that you pay on your tax return. So that gives some legitimacy to this idea of there's been an exchange of value. I can deduct it on my tax return. So there's some acknowledgement that this is a legitimate service that we need, and there's a tax deduction for that. If there's a tax deduction, it feels legitimate. You can deduct accounting fees. You can deduct the investment management fees for your non-registered investment accounts. Those are deductible on your tax return. Can you deduct financial planning fees? No, not really. Not right now. Thanks, feds. I mean, if you are concerned about the financial health of Canadians, possibly we could consider adding financial planning fees into the deductible advisory fees that we already have. I belong to a professional organization. It's made up of financial planners, investment advisors, accountants, estate planners, and we talk a lot about really technical aspects of mainly estate settlement, estate planning, estate settlement, all things to do with estate. And in a group conversation one time about will planning, an estate advisor said that he had recently recommended that parents that he was working with put a clause in their will that the estate would cover the accounting fees for the beneficiaries. They were expecting to have a fairly significant estate, and while their children were adults, they weren't that far into adulthood, and this was potentially a large estate, and the parents were really worried about how their beneficiaries would handle the inheritance. And so the estate planner said, look, if you feel like they're going to have trouble handling this, and it's important for you to get advice, one of the ways you can make that clear is if you put a clause in that says, the estate will pay for this. Like you don't have to pay for it out of your inheritance. The estate will pay. And that way, before you make any major decisions, so before the inheritance even hits your bank account, you can meet with an accountant and talk this through so that your beneficiaries understand their options and the inheritance better. And the parents were thrilled. They thought that was a great idea. I also think that's a great idea. I love the idea of kind of leaving nudges, leaving your wishes, letting your beneficiaries know that you want them to be comfortable with this, I think that's great. I did ask this estate planner, though. I said, have you ever recommended that the clause include financial planners? And he looked a little bit startled and he said, no, that's a really great idea. And I said, thanks. I'm so glad we've known each other for 4 years now. And you've, in fact, called me to ask me questions about your clients when you get stuck. And somehow, your clause included just accountants, not financial planners. So, other advisors, your accountant will very quickly tell you which question is a lawyer question. Your lawyer will very quickly tell you which question is an accounting question. But when was the last time you ever asked another professional a question and they said you should talk to a financial planner about that? That just doesn't happen very often. And I wish it would. Because the advice is there. It's possible to get a financial plan that answers all of your questions and helps you make really confident decisions about your money. It's possible. And I would love it to be more common. So what can you do today to start taking control over your finances from where you are with the advisors that you have? When I said earlier that I believe it's false that you don't know what questions to ask, here's your question. You're going to take control of your money from wherever you are right now, with whatever level of advisor you have right now, by saying, when they pitch you something or propose an idea or ask you to change something, you're going to say, how does this help me meet my goals? And then you're going to wait for the answer. So let's say you're at the bank and they offer you a new credit card, or they offer to increase your line of credit. And you say, how does that help me meet my goals? If you have an investment advisor and they're proposing that you move money from here to there, sell this, buy that, deposit this over here, change this type of account to this, say, how does that help me meet my goals? You can ask your accountant the same thing. And you don't need to know anything about the products or strategies that they're proposing. That's not your job. That question nudges or forces your advisor to connect your goals to their solution. So that's how you know whether this is right for you. That question that most of us have had at some point, is it good for me or good for you? This question is going to give you an answer. This question, in fact, answers a lot of things. If your advisor can't answer this question, they might not know your goals. Maybe they haven't asked. Maybe they weren't listening. But if they can't repeat your goals to you, then possibly the strategy that they're proposing doesn't line up. So this is a very useful question, and I know you know how to ask it. How does this help me meet my goals? So that's how you're going to start taking control of your financial decisions when you are faced with another advisor. You can also use this question on yourself. If it feels like your spending is a little bit fuzzy, if the day-to-day, money in, money out, feeling a little confusing, you're going to ask yourself this question when you're faced with a spending decision. And remember, you can do this at peak financial confusion, even before you've settled on how you're going to adjust anything at all. Starting right now, you can say, how does this Amazon purchase help me meet my goals? How does buying this sweater help me meet my goals? And then you're going to have to answer yourself. And what that's going to do for you at peak financial confusion, what it's going to do is have you answer yourself and say, oh, I don't know how it helps me meet my goals because I haven't really listed them out. Maybe I should list them out before I make another purchase. You can do that, right? Clarity, tiny steps, tiny shifts, and that's going to grow. So this is a question that you can use in almost every situation that you're in. And it's going to start providing clarity for you and it's going to start giving you direction. And so let's talk about what happens when you do see a plan. What does that do? So now we've got maybe some bigger questions. So I talked about some tinier shifts. Let's talk about, what does a financial planning experience do? How does it help you answer the bigger questions? I'm going to tell you 2 stories about 2 appointments that I had several weeks ago. The first one, the couple wanted to know, he was already retired. She wants to retire right now. And she said, can we do that? Like, could we actually do this? Do I have to go back to work? That was their question. Can I retire right now? And I said, you can retire right now if you are willing to spend in this range, if you are willing to manage your net worth like this. Here's your boundaries. If the markets do this, here are your boundaries. Here's how it shifts. But yes, you can retire right now. And then they said, okay, that seems to work for us. But it's also important to us to help our kids if they need it. We're just really concerned about the job market that they're graduating into, and we think they might need more money than we thought. And so how can I retire and we can still do this thing? And I adjusted their plan. I said, okay, you can help the kids at this level. This is your ballpark. If you help them over this level, you are going to have to start reducing your own spending. But do you see how this all fits in to what you have now? And the relief for them was visible. Now, before you think, I knew it, she only works with rich people. Rich people are her clients. I'm going to tell you about the second meeting I had that week. Also with a couple. He did want to retire right now. But he said, I don't really think that's possible, but that's what I really want. And I said, okay, for you, it looks like this. You can do it, but here's what it would look like. Your financial risks are large. And they said, that's what we thought. And then they asked, so how could we increase our financial stability right now and still get to a retirement that we want? And for the rest of that meeting, we talked about what was important to each of them, where the markers were. So what important things did I want them to know? Where are their kind of signposts along their path? What was important for them to focus on? And also, quite frankly, what wasn't important to focus on? So where are their priorities? What were not priorities for them? And how they could keep moving themselves towards retirement. And their relief was visible. The level of relief for both of those couples was the same. One of them got exactly the answer they wanted. One of them didn't, but they had more information. They had context. They knew what to do now. And that is an immense relief for most of us. So what if you knew that you were saving enough to retire the way you wanted on the timeline that you wanted? What if you knew you could go on a vacation every year without wrecking another goal? What if you knew how the current headline items, like maximize this, minimize this, delay this, accelerate that, actually played out in your situation? What if you knew what would happen if you accelerated this, delayed this, minimized that? What if you could set up some of your financial decisions on autopilot? And then you were just making confident decisions on the things that you had to decide in the moment. What if you knew that you were on the right track for you? Remember, this is your money, and you get to decide who you talk to about it, how you interact with them, and the products and services that you use. We have set up a system that makes you feel powerless or at a disadvantage, but that's not really true. It is true if you act that way, but it's not true if you don't act that way. So now you know that you can just pause a conversation and say, how does that help me meet my goals? And then you can make a decision. Thank you for listening. Make sure to check out the other episodes. There are 12 in this series, each one focusing on a different important aspect of financial planning. You can listen from start to finish, or pick and choose the episodes that matter most to you. Consider sharing an episode with someone else who needs to hear it. Thank you for liking and subscribing. And remember, no matter what you think of your financial situation, I've heard worse, which means you and I can make it better.